Hi, I'm Vakele Madikane. You're watching From the Cape with Bass, hosted by Daniel Peterson.
Good day, everyone. Today we are with great bass player Vakele Madikane. Vakele,
Yes, sir.
thanks for making time for me, making time for From the Cape with Bass. I have a few questions pertaining this beautiful instrument that you play here.
hmm
So my first question, what was your first musical experience as a child growing up?
For me, music started as a very young boy. My mother was a musician, actually. She was a singer
Mm,
at church. She was a singer. And my stepdad was part of an orchestra.
okay.
So I got exposed to music from a young age, but I didn't start to play any instrument at
Mm,
that young age. I was just exposed. My stepdad had musicians coming over the house. Sometimes they would bring instruments. They would play. But being so young, I think I was like 5 or 6 years old. I just watched and
yeah.
never really understood. But I loved what I saw, and my mother being a musician, I always went to church with her.
Mm,
So I would say my first musical love was the keyboard because
okay.
I always used to go to church with my mom, and
So do you play keyboard as well?
yeah, I play keyboard as well.
Okay.
So every time I would go to church, I would always go sit next to the keyboard player
Okay.
as a child. So they would just allow me, and I would go and just watch. So that was I think that is the moment I can define as my first musical experience.
Wow.
Although music was all around me as a child,
hmm
but I would say me being in front or next to the keyboard player,
Mm.
that gave me the experience of falling in love with
Okay, I
the
see.
instrument and the music itself.
So why did you eventually choose to play the bass?
Okay, so it's a bit of a long story. So I had played, this is fast forward, obviously. I had played for a church, right?
Okay.
I was playing for a church. I was playing keyboard at church. And my pastor at the time, he wanted to get all the instruments to be part of the worship service and praise service. So at the time, there was only the keyboard. I was only playing alone.
Okay.
And I convinced him to buy all the instruments.
You convinced the pastor.
Yes, I
Okay.
convinced him to buy all the instruments, meaning I told him to buy the drums, told him to buy a bass amp and a bass guitar, a lead guitar and a lead guitar amp.
And were they players at the time?
Nope,
Okay.
there
So you
weren't
had that
any.
mustard seed faith, like we get the
Yes,
instruments and we'll get the
yes,
musicians later.
yes.
Okay.
There wasn't any instruments, I mean, any instrument players at that time, any musicians besides me in the
Mm.
church. So I convinced him and he did it.
Yeah.
Because I told him if we want musicians to come to the church, there has to be instruments.
Mm.
If there aren't any instruments, musicians will come. We won't even know the musician. He will come and he'll see that there's no instruments to play, and he'll just leave again.
Mm.
So I understood this at the time. At the time, I didn't have many instrumentalist friends or musician friends.
Yeah.
I just knew keyboard players at the time.
Okay.
So uh, that with mixed with that, and then having the instruments readily available at church without anybody playing them for a while, I eventually picked the bass guitar up because I'd seen watching music videos and um, uh, popular gospel artists, especially American gospel artists, watching them. I loved the sound of the bass,
Yeah.
so I picked that up naturally and with nobody to teach me.
So what was your go-to, like when you used to watch these videos? Which artist did you
Yeah,
really gravitate towards?
yeah. So the artist I watched, which was a gospel artist, it's Bishop Morton.
Yeah,
Bishop
Bishop
Morton,
Morton. Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
he was my favorite because that's
So he's the one that does that song. Lord,
Yes,
whatever He's
yes,
doing in the
yes,
season.
yes.
Okay.
Bishop Morton. The first song I think I heard that sparked my interest in bass was the song "Open the Floodgates of Heaven."
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that was the song.
Do you know that
Yeah.
who's the bass player on there?
No, 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 no.
On that live DVD, it's Andrew Goucher. You should go check it
Oh,
out.
I should check out the live. I should check it out. So it actually inspired me
Mm,
to play the bass.
okay.
I picked the bass up. I taught myself the song literally,
Mm,
not knowing anything about the fretboard. All I knew was the piano. So I taught myself how to play that song.
okay.
And eventually it became a roller coaster. I started to choose different songs that I would teach myself, and it carried on from there. But I didn't play like on an official stage.
Yeah.
Even at church, I hadn't played yet until two of my keyboard player friends. They wanted to come to church, to my church. When they came, oh, by that time we had already had a drummer.
Mm,
So it was just me on the keyboard and the drummer.
okay.
So my friends used to come to the midweek services. When they came to the midweek services, both of them, they both brought their keyboards and they used to play the keyboards, and there
Okay.
was a drummer and then there was the bass. So
Mm,
I would pick up the bass, not being experienced or anything, I would just play.
okay.
So that's how I started to play the bass.
No.
It progressed from there, playing like on midweek services. I started to play midweek services. It eventually went to Sundays.
Oh, so
Um,
you graduated.
yes, it was a process. It was a gradual process. Um, I eventually started to um, I started going to shows
Mm,
in my area.
mm.
It
So where you from?
Yeah, I was about to say. So I'm from Kailicha. I grew
Okay.
up in Kailicha.
Okay.
Um, and in that area there was a lot of upcoming gospel artists, and
Mm,
they used to do shows and events. So I used to go to those shows, and sometimes bass players wouldn't be there. I would pick up the bass and play. So people started to notice, oh, there's a guy who knows how to play bass. Vakes, he knows how to play bass.
mm.
So it started from there. So I started
Okay.
to play in shows. People started to eventually hire me for shows like years, and I used to play gospel shows. So that is those are my roots.
Yeah.
Gospel is my roots. So jazz is totally new to me.
Okay.
Playing jazz, playing all these nuances, these funks, all these new other genres of music. I'm predominantly
Gospel
a
based.
gospel. Yeah, that's where my foundation is. A gospel bass player.
Talking about your foundation,
Yes.
do you have any musical education?
Okay. In terms of musical education, I have none.
Okay.
I have none. But what I can say is my musical education is from YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything that I know in terms of theory, in terms of this instrument itself, the fretboard, everything that has to do with the bass,
Mm,
I learned from YouTube. I taught
okay.
myself. I did want to go to music college, but it never worked out.
Okay.
Yes. Um, there was a famous music college at the time. I think it was called CMI. I wanted to go there, but it did not. It did not materialize. So I eventually never went. But I decided, you know what? I did not go to college. I'll just teach myself how to
Mm,
play,
mm.
like how I've been doing all this time.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So tell me about the artists that you've worked with, and also if there's albums that you're
Yes.
working on or that you've worked on. Can you tell me about that, please?
Okay. Um, I've I've worked with a lot of gospel artists
As a bass player.
as a bass player, especially in Kailicha.
Okay.
Um, there's the likes of Lusanda Beja.
Mm,
I've worked with him. I've worked with Kolisa Kwinana, um, Kumani Ngojo, and You Praise.
mm,
Uh, there's quite a number. Tenjuem Doda. There's quite a number. There's quite a lot of artists I worked with in Kailicha as per se, and also outside of Kailicha, in the gospel scene.
Okay.
Yes. Uh, so I recently, not so long ago, I moved to Johannesburg.
Okay.
So I reside in Johannesburg now. I'm not in Cape Town anymore. But in Johannesburg, I've worked with various artists as well. There's an album, an EP album that I've recently done with a recording artist called Mello. Be Great. Um, yeah, I've done that with her. I've worked with the likes of Kabza the Small. I've worked with the
So these are
likes.
all gospel artists.
No. Kabza the Small is not.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a amapiano artist.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. I've worked with him. I've done student sessions with him. I've done a song. I've played on various songs, but obviously, when you're recording or a session basis, you're not featured or recognized in the song as per se, as per the agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you must just keep quiet and say, "Hey."
Yeah, exactly. You
You
must just
played
say,
on it.
"Yeah, no, I
When
played in the
when you
song."
hear on radio, like,
Yeah, exactly.
I remember this day, but you keep
Yeah.
it to yourself.
Sorry. So that's, yeah. I've worked with quite a number of artists. Some of them I can't even think on the top of my head,
Mm,
but predominantly gospel. I've worked with jazz artists before. There's a artist called Tani Kriba.
mm,
I've worked with her. I've worked with a number of um, musicians from UCT
okay.
that do African music. I've worked with them. I've just been all over the place.
Oh, that's good. That's good,
Yes,
man.
yes.
Tell me about the gear that you have.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with my Sire. With this bass guitar. This bass guitar is a Sire M7. Um, I got it from the United States.
Mm,
Um, Somebody bought it for me, and they brought it for me from the United States. So this particular bass, you get many versions of this particular M7, but this one is the swamp ash body. It has a swamp ash body, and also, okay, the top is also swamp ash.
mm,
The whole body is swamp ash. You have a ebony fingerboard,
okay.
one piece maple neck. It's one piece. IMAS bridge. We have uh, humbucking pickups, and yeah, it's just a beautiful bass. I do have another bass. I do have another bass besides this one. My first bass that I ever bought with my money.
Mm,
That one is Ibanez BTB 405 QM.
okay.
Yeah, but this is the bass I use, and I also use a pedal, a Boss GT B1
Mm.
pedal, and yeah, that's all the gear that I use.
So that's your go-to whenever you go out and perform. You always take your pedal and your amplification. What do you use?
My amp, I don't particularly carry an amp. I think if you're a bass player or a South African bass player, you know that when you're performing, you usually don't carry your amp.
Mm,
You usually do a tech rider, and in your tech rider, you'll request the amplification that you want.
mm,
So typically, when I request an amp, I usually use a Mark bass,
mm.
800 tube
Why so
head.
much?
Yeah, well, okay.
Because I'm looking at it now. 800 is a lot of
Yeah,
power.
800 watts. So the thing is, with bass guitar, unlike other instruments, it's very finicky in terms of how your pronunciation of your notes when you are doing a live performance.
Mm,
So you want the most power you can get. from the amp so that you play comfortably. You don't strain yourself to make yourself heard. It also depends on the bass that you're using. It depends. Oh, sorry. It depends on the bass that you're using. It depends on what pickups are in your bass. So if your pickups are powerful pickups, it's very easy for your bass guitar to cut through the mix, to be clear and to be heard. So it also depends on that. But your amp is the power on your amp is very important. You don't want to be on stage and not have enough power to hear yourself. Most importantly, it's for you as a bass player to hear yourself and to hear yourself with confidence. I think that's the best way to put it. To hear yourself with confidence and be able to play and articulate every note that you want to articulate the proper way that you want it to be heard. I think that's very important. I think for beginner bass players who've never been on big stages, they wouldn't understand what I'm saying. But for bass players who've been on big stages, like where there's big outdoor events, you need a powerful amp. You need a powerful amp, especially if you don't have in-ears. In-ear system to hear yourself playing, you need a powerful amp. Even when you do have a in-ear system, you still need a powerful amp to feel every note. So that's why I prefer the 800. But sometimes you don't get what you request. Sometimes you get 600 watts, 500 watts, depends. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any advice for young up and coming bass players and musicians?
Well, my advice would be, if you want to play bass, right? I would advise anyone who wants to play bass to also learn the piano as well. Um, for musical purposes. So the bass is a very intricate instrument. It sounds simple, it looks simple, but it's intricate in a way that you have to focus on melody, you have to focus on harmony, and you have to focus on the rhythm at the same time. Because when we talk about playing grooves, you have to be melodically correct and harmonically correct. Because if your bass is not complementing what the piano is playing in terms of the chords, and what the backing vocalists are doing as well on the vocals, it's going to be off. So you have to focus on these three elements: harmonically, melodically, and rhythmically. So I would advise for up and coming bass players, whether you are still learning or you are playing already, to learn the piano, know how to play basics. If that's all you can do, learn the basics, and and just immerse yourself in the instrument itself, the bass. It's a very demanding instrument, especially physically as well. Your forearms need to be very strong, because bass it's a demanding instrument in terms of your endurance. You need dexterity in your hands, your forearms, and also endurance to play long sessions, long gigs, because that's what it's about, playing the bass. Yeah.
Vakele, thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much for your time. Thank you for
Yes,
making
sir.
time for me, making time for From the Cape with Bass. Godspeed
Thank
on
you.
your journey.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for liking and sharing this video with your family and friends. Please follow From the Cape with Base on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Thank you so much.